Hello and welcome to yesterday's Airlines. In this video I'm going to be taking a look at the very recently announced Phoenixmodels 1/400 scale releases announced for May and no doubt arriving in June if Phoenix keeps their usual schedule. This is my second one of these videos following on from the geminijets version, so let's see how it goes. As before, I'll be ranking these releases and seeing which ones I think are going to be supersonic and which ones I think are going to be scrap metal. Now, Phoenix are probably my least favourite of the major manufacturers. They produce a lot of pretty tedious stuff in general. Lots of Asian airlines. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but a lot of their molds are pretty ordinary. Phoenix themselves haven't really gone anywhere special for quite some time when it comes to 400 scale, and they keep on releasing molds or releases on that bloody awful 747 mold, but we'll get to that. It's not all bad, you know. I've got quite a lot of Phoenixmodels and occasionally they do manage to surprise you with something that's quite interesting, and there are still areas of the Phoenix mold catalogue which are excellent. So we've got quite a good number of releases this month. By the look of things, there are 13 releases that I can see, and we'll run through these releases, and as beforehand I'll comment on whether I think they're interesting releases and also how likely they're going to be good releases. Okie doke. So surely everyone knows what they're getting when they buy Phoenixmodels. You're obviously going to get glossy finish, you're going to get shiny undercarriage, you're going to get printing detail that isn't quite up there with jcwings or ngmodels or Panda, but at the same time there's still some diamonds to be found in the rough, and some of the diamonds that Phoenix have are their Airbus molds, and in particular the A330 to A340 series, which are probably their best. Aside from the A380s, which I just forgot about. So sticking in the Airbus area, their Airbus wide bodies, outside of the A300, which stinks, Phoenix generally can do a good job. And this month they have announced quite a few Airbus wide bodies, so it actually looks like it could be a decent month for Phoenix. And we'll start off with Mahan Air from Iran. Phoenix have announced an Airbus A340-600. Looks like the reg is EPMMT. And Mahan Air is obviously a very major airline in Iran. I think it's actually the largest airline in Iran nowadays. And it's actually got some love in 400 scale in recent times. ngmodels have made a 2+2 and Mahan themselves made an A340-600 last year. Sorry, I meant Phoenix, not Mahan. That obviously must have sold well, because here comes an A340-300. And why the hell not? It's a good mould from Phoenix. The A340-300 obviously shares many components with the A330, which is still a good mould as well. And so there's no reason to expect that this won't be a solid model. Now, you can't really argue that Mahan Air have got a particularly exciting livery. They don't. It's pretty boring. But nonetheless, it's a nice gap filler for those who collect Iranian models, which do seem to be surprisingly popular. I'm a big fan of Iranian models myself, actually, and I may well get this model. We'll see. I'm running out of space in my Iranian shelf, but I don't think there's any reason to suggest that this isn't going to be anything other than a high flyer, at least for me. Perhaps it would be more supersonic if Mahan Air didn't have such a boring livery, but it's a good release. I'm sure it'll sell well. It's a good mould. Phoenix won't muck this one up, surely. On to release number 2, and this is more like it from Phoenix, Kam Air, which despite the name is actually from Afghanistan. Afghanistan's largest private airline. I believe it's actually Afghanistan's only private airline nowadays. But Kam Air have got a couple of A340-300s. I think they've also got some 737s. And it's a really cool kind of retro styly scheme, with orange and this dark purple, or is it dark blue, and they've even got the face mask on, as many airlines are doing nowadays to kind of make their aircraft look more modern, but it looks pretty cool. It's a great livery. Again, it's on a good mould. This is really quite exciting from a Phoenix perspective. They don't usually produce airlines that are this interesting and unusual. So big ups to Phoenix here. I think this is going to be a supersonic for me. This one's cool. I like the look of this. I think they'll probably do a good job, and it's a really interesting mould. I've got absolutely no excuses for buying this model, so that's a shame. But anyone who does, I think, will be pretty happy with it. It's a good release. Well done, Phoenix. Can't argue there. Kam Air is going to be a nice model. Okay, now moving into larger A340s, and Phoenix have announced 3 A340-600 series models in this release set. And the first one I'm going to look at is South African, and it's in the Star Alliance scheme. So this is actually a livery that Phoenix have not produced beforehand. They have produced an SAA A340-600 in the past, but it was in standard colours. So this is a good gap filler. Once again, it's almost, I guess, a retro release nowadays, and it's going to be nice. If anything, the A340-600 mould that Phoenix have is better than their 300. It really is very nice, and it's probably, yeah, actually, I think it is my favourite remaining Phoenix mould, if you ignore perhaps the IL-96, which they don't use much. Then, yeah, it's a really nice mould, and it is the best A340-600 that's around, probably because there aren't very many, to be honest, but it is exceptional. And so this should be a good release. There are lots of collectors out there who like collecting alliance schemes, so I imagine this will be something which, you know, works really well for them. And again, it's a super simple livery because you've just got the Star Alliance tail and titles with only a very smidge of SAA branding. So I'm sure it'll look nice. I'm sure it'll be good. For me, again, I think this one's going to go up into the high flyer area. It's not especially exciting, but it's going to be a good model. Can't argue too much with that. Okay, next up is an Iberia A340-600. And looking back through the list of models that have been made before, this isn't the first time that Phoenix have made an Iberia A340-600. They made one in 2014 by the look of things, in exactly this horrible, tedious, modern Iberia scheme, which really does absolutely nothing to set one's heart on fire, especially when it's on such a long aircraft as an A340-600, all of that Euro white. This one really does absolutely nothing for me, this scheme. I so much preferred Iberia's previous livery, and you'd have thought they could have come up with something more exciting than this, but perhaps it's all part of them being able to tediously shift aircraft between airlines of their group. It's boring as, isn't it? But Phoenix have done it before. They won't make a mess of it. It's a good mould, so it's going to be a good model, but I can't bring myself to make this high flyer because it's just so boring, and they've done it before anyway. So this one's going to go into workhorse. It's going to be a really solid, good model. If you missed out first time round, then yeah, it might be something you're interested in. If you collect Iberia or you love boring liveries, knock yourself out. It's not one for me, but it's going to be a decent enough model. And the next A340-600 is also another repeat. In fact, this one's a constant repeat. It seems like Cathay Pacific models just can sell endlessly, and so jcwings and Phoenix just continue to produce them all the time. This will be the fourth Cathay A340-600 that Phoenix have made, and 3 of them are on this mould, the good mould, the seamless mould. So it's going to be a good model. It's a classic scheme. It's going to be very nice. Can't argue with any of that stuff. It's going to be a good release. They've done it before. If you don't have one of these already, and you collect Cathay, I'd be very surprised. But obviously, some people must not have it, otherwise they wouldn't be making it, I guess. So it's going to be perfectly fine, and it fits into exactly all the same, places in my mind as the Iberia. It's a great scheme, but surely you've got this already. So I'm going to put this one up into workhorse as well. It'll be a good model. It's going to be exactly the same as the previous 2 on this mould, just with a different rego, one assumes. Okay, next up we get very topical, and we have the A350-100, 1000 even, in the long-range leader Qantas colours that it just recently was in Australia, promoting the Qantas purchase for their Project Sunrise. Phoenix A350s, what do I think about those? They're bog ordinary, really, aren't they? They're beneath anything Aviation 400 is making. They're beneath anything ngModels is making. They're beneath probably the jcwings Gemini updated A350-2. Not all of those manufacturers have a 1000 series. In fact, I think it's just Aviation 400 that does. And yeah, it's not gonna be great. It's because the mold isn't great, and I would have thought that in time someone else is going to be making this. So if I were you, I'd probably not buy it. But they have improved their A350 somewhat. They're not as bad as they used to be in terms of engines dragging along the ground. The gear still seems too long. The shape still isn't quite right. Yeah, it's going to be a workhorse again, this one. I don't think it's going to be a dreadful model, and it wouldn't be a model that I was embarrassed to show off. I've got some Phoenix A350s, but it's not going to be spectacular. And really, it's just the house colours with the Qantas titling slapped on the top of it, so it's not exactly that super exciting. But I imagine there's a big market for it. There's a lot of Qantas collectors out there, I bet, and it's probably going to, it'll be fine. And it'll take Aviation 400 ages to get their release out. So, yeah, might be worth picking up if you really like Qantas. Okay, so that's the Airbus side of things. So now move across to have a look at the Boeing products for this month from Phoenix. And we begin with a pair of Amazon Prime Air 737-800s. Now, the good parts of this are that Prime Air has quite an interesting livery. It's got this nice blue front and a darker rear half with the Amazon swoosh, and it's quite nice. So from that regards, you might look at these and think these are a good option, an interesting release. However, I should say that Phoenix are a bit late to the game here, and the Amazon Prime Air has already been released by both ngModels and jcwings, both of which have superior 737-800 molds, although the ngModels version is miles ahead of the jcwings one. So really it's kind of like, well, what's the point? This is further accentuated, I think, by the fact that both of these aircraft being released by Phoenix in this set are carrying test regos. N448CC is one of them, and the other one is N545RL. And checking out those aircraft, which I think are both operated by Sun Country, or at least one of them is, they've both been re-registered since. So it's a bit weird to be using the regis that they are, and they're kind of painted on the aircraft, and when you look at the pictures you can see that they're painted on with this white box around them, which very much suggests they're not the registrations they'll come up with. So they're not even really, the proper regos for those aircraft anyway. Moving on to the mould itself, Phoenix has had a hell of a time in recent years with this mould. The mould itself is old. It was perhaps okay about 10 years ago, but when you look at it now and compare it to other 737s, it's just not good enough. The nose is a bit weird, always reminds me a little bit of duck's bill. The rest of the lower fuselage kind of seems to melt into itself. The engines are a bit deformed, the wings tend to stick up too high, the undercarriage is bad. They can't fit the nose gear to save their life. It's invariably in the wrong place or just looking bizarre. I've had some Phoenix 737s that have just had the weirdest undercarriage. And it's got the kind of classic Phoenix, way too large rudder tail join thing going on where, you might think, oh, that's going to represent the free rudder, but actually, no, it's way too large, the seam where the tail joins the fuselage. So overall, the mould is really ordinary. And on top of that, they can't prick the cockpit windows properly. They're better than they've been at times, but they're often wonky. They're almost always too low. It probably doesn't help that the form of the front of the model is quite odd. So it's really not a great mould, and their printing is dreadful on it as well. Plus, these have been made by ngmodels and jcwings, so surely, you know, anyone with any real sense would have gone out and got the ngmodels version, which is vastly superior to anything Phoenix is ever going to produce on this mould. Basically, these are going to be pretty weak models. So for me, you know, these models aren't doing anything special. They're not quite scrap metal, but they're definitely going to be slipping into the gas guzzler category, in my opinion. Okay, 747s. Anyone who knows me knows what I think about Phoenix 747 classic molds. They're 100, 200, 300, 400 molds. They are abysmal. There's so much wrong with them that it's just a complete embarrassment. They are possibly the worst mass market 400 scale mold that has ever been made. There is really no excuse for buying them. The wings droop down, the nose looks awful, the proportions are just wrong across the board, even before you get to, you know, the glossy paint and all that crap. They're shocking, and the fact that Phoenix keeps on making them just illustrates that collectors just aren't that discerning, because obviously they're still buying them. I'd like to think that people could look at these things and say, hey, that looks like a piece of shit, I'm not buying that, but apparently people can't. So they're still selling, and to be fair, even some of my good friends do have Phoenix 747s, so I can't be completely harsh on collectors buying them, because you know who you are, but you're good friends of mine. And I love you, honest, but don't buy Phoenix 747s. They're just dreadful. I mean, the two we got here, what do we got? Atlas Air, Dragon Air Cargo, with the little Dragon Air Cargo titles on the front, and a Korean Air 400 with, looks like some kind of World Cup footballer on the side. Nice liveries, you know. They'd make perfectly decent releases, but not on these molds. These are both going straight in the scrap metal folder, because, as I said, don't buy Phoenix 747 Classics. They suck. Okay. I'll save more ranting on that for next month when they release more of the bloody things. Okay. Feeling a bit better. 747-8s. Now, this is different kettle of fish, and Phoenix 747-8s are perfectly good. The mold's nice, and in fact, arguably, maybe not even arguably, they've got a better 747-8 freighter mold than jcwings, because the angle and the form of the hump is nicer and more accurate. The undercarriage is a bit, but overall, they're good molds. Haven't got any issues with the Phoenix 747-8. And what have we got here? We've got CargoLogic Air, which is the British freighter arm of Airbridge Cargo, I believe. Hence the colours are subtly different. And I think that, in fact, they may be out of business due to the Ukrainian war. And even if they aren't, I don't think this 747-8 actually is still in the fleet. And I think their fleet currently consists of a pair of 400 series. But regardless, it's a fairly nice scheme. It's going to be an attractive model, and it's got a good mould behind it. Haven't got any issues with this one at all. This one looks like it's probably going to slip up there into the high flyer area, because I really do quite like the livery here, and it's nice to see Phoenix, you know, trying to find new 747-8 schemes, because there really aren't that many. So this one's pretty cool. And next up is Atlas Air. This is a really classic scheme. It's a really attractive scheme, even though it's got Euro white and big billboard tiles. It's really nice, and should look really good on the 747-8 mold as well. So this one too, I think I'm going to slip up into the high flyer area, because it looks like it should be a classy release and should be looking good on that mold. So not bad. Incidentally, I should point out something which I didn't realise when I did the initial recording for this, and that is that Atlas Air is not a new model for Phoenix. They actually have produced this mould and airline combination previously, though it was all the way back in 2012. So it's, you know, not unreasonable for 10 years later there'd be a second release of this. Obviously, it's also been released by geminijets relatively recently, both as an interactive mould and as a standard mould. Okay, last up we've got EgyptAir, a 777-300 ER. I'm not actually an enormous fan of the modern EgyptAir scheme. I like the fact they've still got Horus in the branding, but it looks kind of weird and it doesn't fit on the fuselage, and it's mainly Euro white. It's not a great scheme in my opinion. I prefer the older EgyptAir schemes from the 80s myself, where they had the desert sand colours rather than the blue colours. Blue isn't really a colour which I associate with Egypt, but hey, that's just my opinion. EgyptAir, it's a relatively interesting release, I guess, for Phoenix. They don't produce a lot of African airlines, so from that perspective, you know, it's quite interesting. The Phoenix 777 mould is not as loved as it used to be because of competition from Aviation 400 and jcwings, who've both got better moulds nowadays. But it's still a good mould. It's still a perfectly good mould, and it should be a perfectly decent model. And you'd have to say, you know, that it's going to be fine. So I'd say for this one, again, it's another workhorse for me. It's not quite exciting enough to be a high flyer, but it's going to be perfectly okay. So actually looking through all the models here that I've talked about, to be honest, it's a good month for Phoenix. I don't often feel very positive about Phoenix release sets. If I collected even vaguely more modern models and I could slightly creep out my collection criteria again, then there's easily 2 or 3 models I'd get out of this month's select, which is not particularly common. I'm really quite interested in both of the A340-300s. They both look like they're good. The Airbus Cargo 747-8, CargoLogic Air, looks good. If I didn't have a Cathay A340-600 already, I'd be interested in that too. You know, the A350 is like tempting, but their mold isn't good enough to really make me interested in buying it. And if you're, you know, collecting Iberia or South African and you need to fill a gap, then those A340s will be great as well. So it's actually a surprisingly good month for Phoenix in comparison to months where they just released a huge number of Asian airlines or some god-awful 747s. They've of course still got the god-awful 747s here, but they've also surrounded them with some of their finer potential products using molds like the A340, 300 and 600 and the 747-8 and the 777, which are some of the few molds that Phoenix can really still compete with. So it's a decent enough month. Okay, anyway, that's enough from me. So I hope you enjoyed the video. As per usual, leave some comments. What do you guys think about this month's Phoenix releases? And I'll see you next time at Yesterday's Airlines. Cheers.